Hello everyone. Today we're going to discuss Chapter 5 of the EasyBuilder Pro user manual. This video will serve as an in-depth introduction to all of the functions and features found within our system parameters. Let's get started by opening an instance of EasyBuilder Pro, and as always, when opening EasyBuilder, you'll be prompted to select your device. Now the features available to you depend on what device you select. The system parameters of our IE series, for example, has different features than our more advanced CMT series. In this example, I'll start by selecting a CMT 3072. And as stated within our user manual, the system parameters can be found on the left-hand side of our toolbar after selecting the Home tab. Although this menu will open automatically each time you start a new project. And with our system parameters open, we'll begin our introduction with the Device tab. Starting from the top right corner, you'll notice a blue text object that states "What's my IP?" To eliminate any confusion, this text object will tell you the IP of your computer, not the HMI that you might be connected to. Just underneath this, we have our device list. And we briefly introduced this in our last video, but within this list we can add, remove, or manage external devices within our project. To add a PLC or external device, EasyBuilder Pro gives us several tools located at the bottom of this list. For example, if I select New HMI, I can add one or more remote HMIs within my device list by simply specifying the IP address of the remote HMI I wish to communicate with. After which, I can select OK on the bottom right, and this device will be added to my device list. Within our device list, structure is just as important as the devices you add. For example, now that I've added a new HMI, you'll notice that upon adding a new device or PLC, the location of the device is listed as remote. This occurs because EasyBuilder Pro automatically determines the location of the device based on what HMI you have selected at the time. In other words, to specify a local PLC, once I've already configured a remote HMI, I'll need to select the local HMI within my device list. Now let's add a local device within our device list. On the top we have our device name, which will be used to describe the device within your system parameters and throughout your project. Underneath this, the device's location is specified. And towards the center we'll find our device type drop-down list. There are two ways to search for a device. My preferred method is by clicking the center of the drop-down list and a search dialog will appear. And within our search bar, I can enter the manufacturer or PLC that I'll be using within my project. And the alternative to searching for a device is by selecting the arrow on the right side of our device type drop-down list. However, this could take you some time as EasyBuilder Pro currently supports well over 300 different drivers and protocols. Once we've configured our driver, we'll need to select the appropriate COM interface. This selection can be made in the drop-down list next to IF. If we select Ethernet, we can configure our IP and port number in the settings menu below. Or if we select a serial interface, we can configure the COM port settings in the same way by selecting the settings button in the section below. Now because I have our Modbus driver selected, there are certain features within this driver's configuration that will not be accessible when using other drivers. Also, some drivers don't necessarily specify communication between the HMI and another device. For example, our Modbus server driver will allow the HMI to act as a Modbus server so that other devices can communicate with it. Now, because communication is such an essential part of your HMI project, I'd like to demonstrate how to find a PLC connection guide for your device. A PLC connection guide is what we recommend that our customers reference when adding a new device into your project. You'll notice that within our device settings menu, we have an Open Device Connection Guide hyperlink. The link will open a PDF within the EasyBuilder Pro install location. The PDF explains how to configure an offline copy of our PLC connection guide, but can also be used to quickly access and search for the PLC guide that you'll need for your application. While we're adding a new device, I thought it might be best to recap some important information covered within our last video. Tag-based PLCs, such as a Siemens S7, will prompt the developer to import PLC tags prior to closing the system parameters. Tag import can be accomplished in two ways. The first method, which is what our support team recommends, is by using the Import Tags button accessible underneath the device list. From within this dialog, you can select the appropriate tag file used within your application. The second method utilizes the Get Tag Info button and can be used to retrieve tag information directly from the PLC when the device is present on your network. With our Device tab covered, we'll move on to the Model tab, which is the next section discussed within our EasyBuilder Pro user manual. Now, since our CMT and non-CMT HMIs offer different methods of configuration within our Model tab, not every feature may be accessible for those using our non-CMTs. At the top of this list, we can select the HMI model that we'll be using within our project. And one thing I'd like to note is that this selection on our CMTs will allow us to essentially convert our project to other applicable CMT models, while our IE project will allow us to change our current model to either an IP, EMT, or XE series, or upgrade the existing project to conform to the standards of our CMT series. But I'd like to note that once your project has been upgraded, it cannot be reverted to a non-CMT HMI. Next to our model selection, we'll also find a way to change the layout of our HMI project from landscape or portrait, or vice versa. If you decide to make this change, you'll need to enable this configuration on your HMI as well by opening the HMI's Settings menu and selecting the General tab on your CMT HMI. Below our current drop-down list, we have a way to configure a specific station number for the HMI within our project. The station number will be used within certain communication scenarios, such as when the HMI is being utilized as a Modbus RTU slave. And of course, we can also configure the communication port number for our current HMI, as well as allow communication between other HMIs from a different series. Towards the center, we can add a printer as a device within our HMI project. The CMT series supports most HP and several Apollo printers by default. And on the bottom, we have the ability to change the pass-through port used when performing a pass-through to an external device, or enable an RS-Link's broadcast response. Next, I'll select our General tab, and right away we'll notice a few essential features on top. Our CMTs support fast display mode, in which the most recent values of objects like bit lamps will be stored in order for them to display faster. We can also enable our RWA registry within this tab. Although it should be enabled by default, RWA registers are another set of retentive registers accessible within EasyBuilder Pro. These registers are used to store data in the event of a power failure or reboot and are configured to automatically save the data entered every 1 minute. By enabling our trigger release action, we can change how objects accept input within our project, as this will allow a button to release itself from its current state if the touch or mouse moves outside of the selected object's focus. Meaning that, without this checked, as long as your touch is still on the HMI screen, the button that was initially selected will be set on, independent of where your finger or mouse moves. By enabling set value when leaving focus, we can eliminate the need for an operator to hit a return key each time a value is entered, which makes writing data to multiple registers much faster than on our non-CMT series. And of course, within this tab, we can also define the startup window, which by default is listed as window 10. If necessary, you can change how objects on the common window are displayed by configuring the common window to lie either above or below the window an operator has selected. It's important to remember that our common window is accessible from any window within our project, and the objects within this window, called common objects, will be displayed on every base window. So changing this format will allow these objects to either overlay or lay under the objects on the current base window. In later versions of EasyBuilder Pro, a new feature called Window Layers is available to help organize your project during development. The layers are quite similar to layers within software used for graphic design, meaning that you can perform work on a specific layer and then hide that layer while you work on the next. Towards the center, we can configure the screensaver and backlight settings. And below this, on our CMT series, we can enable Monitor Mode for our CMT, which will allow you to use window number 3 to display important information within your HMI project while in Monitor Mode on CMT Viewer. This is a little difficult to explain, and I think it will be better to display an example. I have two CMTs here and have enabled Monitor Mode on both. I've also configured some basic data to display within the monitor window of each device. Now we'll go ahead and open CMT Viewer, and I'll begin by adding our CMTs into our application. Now before I use Monitor Mode, I'll need to enable it within the settings menu of CMT Viewer. To do this, I'll select the gear icon, and once open, I'll select More Settings on the bottom left and log in. Once logged in, I'll select our General tab and then enable Monitor Mode. And I'll exit my settings and ensure that both HMIs are minimized. And you'll see that the data displayed on each device is sourced from our monitor windows, independent of what window is currently selected. Monitor Mode supports up to 50 different devices and can itself be customized within the CMT Viewer application. The custom tags for event logs can be used by an operator to enter a custom time when an event is triggered, or via data transfer automatically filled in by an external device. Many individuals aren't aware that we can also add a custom keypad or keyboard. These can be created much like any other window within the HMI's project, and this process will be demonstrated in one of our upcoming videos. Here we can also define the layout of an external USB keyboard within this tab. And if we enable project protection, we can also configure a specific project key that must match the HMI's project key, or that HMI will not be allowed to communicate with the device added within the project. This ensures that the project is made for and will only work with a specific HMI. Now let's take a look at the System tab. This tab serves several functions. The first allows the operator to change the startup language displayed within the HMI's project. This is used in conjunction with the label library. Within the label library, the developer can configure up to 24 different languages and up to 96 different states within an HMI's project. This can be used to translate device error codes, system alarms, or ordinary labels for certain objects. And just underneath this, we can configure a delay time for device communication and initialization macros within the HMI's project. This is used to prevent COM errors from displaying when an external device is not currently running. And we have a separate way to trigger initialization macros by defining a specific macro to be triggered when the HMI is powered on. This is, of course, an alternative to selecting this within the macro workspace itself. If the developer has designed security features within the HMI's project, auto logout will help ensure limited accessibility by logging out idle users from the HMI's project after a set amount of time. In many projects, it's desirable to hide the HMI's settings menu to prevent unauthorized access. This can be accomplished by selecting Hide Start button within the center of our System tab. Although most HMIs can produce sound, certain HMIs can actually play select sounds. If audio output is not desired within your program, this can be configured by defining what actions should trigger an audio-based response or disabling audio output entirely. One of the most important aspects within any project is the ability to protect the developer's intellectual property. Weintek takes this seriously and has added several features to guard against unauthorized use. One of the most effective solutions is to select Disable Upload function within the System tab of your system parameters. In doing so, once the project has been downloaded to the device, there is no way for an operator to upload the project for modification. And just underneath this, we can enable disconnection icons, which can be used to help identify objects with tag-specific errors within your project. Enabling Watchdog will allow the HMI to automatically restart if it stops functioning for a certain period of time. And our last feature allows the HMI to preload text throughout the project, while sacrificing a minuscule amount of time at project boot. And with our System tab covered, we'll move to our Remote tab, which is very important to our CMT series. The Remote tab lets the developer configure several ways in which the HMI can be remotely accessed. At the top, we can restrict the ways in which a remote HMI can access or control a local HMI. And below this, we can configure our VNC password, or set it as password free. Since a VNC client has so much control over the HMI, it may be necessary to restrict the client's remote access capabilities by enabling VNC Monitor Mode. This will allow a VNC client to monitor the HMI's display, but have no control over the device itself. Within our Easy Access section, we can specify the location of our Easy Access server. And of course, for our CMT series, we can enable access to our CMT Diagnoser. The Diagnoser is a tool specific to our CMT series, and one that I've demonstrated several times before. It allows quick navigation throughout the HMI project, as well as the ability to both monitor and control the device. While our CMT Diagnoser works as a standalone application, I find it helpful to use it in conjunction with our CMT Viewer application, so that I can monitor the HMI's display as well. And since CMT Viewer allows multi-user control, the connection count can be specified at the bottom of this tab as well. Now we'll navigate to our Security tab and demonstrate some additional methods of project and account security. On the top of our tab, you'll notice that we have Enhanced Security Mode selected. Enhanced Security Mode allows us to add a maximum of 127 operators within the HMI's project, as well as configure alphanumeric usernames and multi-character passwords. At the top, we'll find our LDAP server configuration, which can be used to provide centralized user account management. Now you'll also notice at the top right, we have a button labeled Editable. This means that the developer has clearance to edit user account information. However, we can easily restrict this by selecting this button and then enabling Read Only and set an appropriate password. I'll go ahead and demonstrate this by clicking OK and then exiting our parameters. Now once I navigate back to our Security tab, we'll find that I can now monitor the accounts in this section, but I no longer have the ability to edit them. This is but another security feature Weintek has included to limit unauthorized access to certain aspects of our project. And just above our account information, we have a checkbox that will allow us to ensure that the HMI project uses account information configured on the HMI currently, instead of what we add below. And as stated, account information can be configured within this list. We can enable up to 11 operators, configure their usernames and passwords, and if you wish to keep a login private, you can hide this information by selecting Secret User. This option can be helpful for admins or maintenance personnel. On the far right, we can configure the class access for user accounts. An account's class or privilege can be used to determine what objects an operator has control over or what menus they can access. And just to backtrack for a second, I mentioned we can configure up to 11 accounts within this menu. But I also stated that we can create up to 127 users. This can be accomplished by using our Administrator Tools application, which you'll find within our Utility Manager. You can also add descriptions for certain accounts and configure the password or enable Secret User for the default admin account. The control address is used to submit security-related commands or configure objects that can't allow username or password entry. Of course, however, you don't necessarily need to create these, as our CMT series has built-in menus that a developer can configure access to within the HMI's project. This includes Windows 70 through Windows 74. And navigating back to our security settings, we'll take a look at our project password. The project password configured here is used to encrypt the EasyBuilder project file, which for CMTs has the file extension CMTP. As an example, I have a project on my desktop in which I have enabled this feature. And when attempting to open this file, you'll notice that the project prompts us to enter the project password. This is another feature that Weintek has included to protect the developer's intellectual property. But I must note that you must remember this password. If you lose it or can no longer remember it, Weintek cannot help you access your project file. The last feature accessible within this tab is one that I demonstrated within our Chapter 1 video. Our HMI, when configured to do so, supports the use of a USB key to gain access to a specified user account. This can be configured using the Administrator Tools application. Our next tab is our Extended Memory section. This section will let the developer configure the storage used to access the HMI's extended memory. If the HMI that I selected supported SD cards as well, this option would also be available here, and I can specify between the two. In an earlier iteration of EasyBuilder Pro, our recipe database could be found within the system parameters. This feature has since been moved to a more appropriate location, our Data/History tab. Many of our HMIs support email functionality. This feature is accessible in the Email tab of our system parameters. Within this section, by enabling our email function, we can configure our SMTP server information, define the sender information, which by default is our HMI's name, and then test our SMTP settings. Once our settings have been deemed successful, we can add recipients by selecting the recipient button on the lower left-hand corner. This button will display our contact editor, which allows us to add and remove new contacts within our HMI, as well as define groups of contacts that should be notified when the HMI sends a specific notification. Up to 16 groups can be configured. And email functionality is used to warn members of an applicable group when a certain event is triggered within the HMI's program. These events can be configured within our event log located in the Data/History tab. Although you will need to configure the email settings prior to accessing the Email tab. As we get close to the end here, I'd like to take a look at our Time Sync tab, which, once configured, will automatically update the HMI's time via an NTP server. Now in front of me I have a demo project that will allow me to automatically update the HMI's time as well as dynamically change the HMI's time zone. Let's take a look at the configuration. In our Time Sync tab, you'll notice our NTP server is configured to retrieve time data from NIST.gov, which hosts a public NTP server. The server's time zone is GMT standard, which we've configured here. And although we can configure daylight savings time to occur automatically, I'm going to leave this blank and we'll get an overview of our objects. On the top, we have some system registers that display the current date and time. On the right, we have a large array of set word objects used to update our UTC settings by submitting the time adjustment in minutes, meaning that our UTC plus 2 button will set a value of 120 into our system register. On the left, we have a couple of set words that control system registers and allow us to change our time sync settings as well as our daylight savings time settings. And I'd like to note that this project is built to demonstrate our NTP features as well as some dynamic control. In general, most projects would only require an NTP server in the HMI's time zone to keep the HMI's time information up to date. However, if necessary, this type of dynamic control is available for you to configure within the HMI's project. Next, we'll take a look at the last tab within our system parameters, Cellular Data Network. Applicable HMIs support certain 3G or 4G dongles, as well as Android tethering. The list of supported dongles can be found by selecting Supported 3G, 4G dongles. And when adding a cellular dongle to your project, you can tie objects to the system registers labeled within this tab to help create a successful connection. If these objects are not created, you can deselect the box labeled Use Existing Settings on HMI and then define the settings as follows. And that finishes our introduction to the system parameters within EasyBuilder Pro. As always, if you found this tutorial helpful and would like to see more, head on over to our YouTube channel and select the playlist tab. Feel free to check out our website as well for free demo projects, user manuals, and more. Thank you for watching.